you've been attacked as being a kind of stooge for Jill Stein and the Green Party. In fact, I know I've heard you be very critical of the Green Party. I want you to talk about that. And then I want to talk about your break with Socialist Alternative. You represented Socialist Alternative on the city council in Seattle. You had a long relationship with that party. But let's talk about those two issues, because you're backing Stein and the Green Party, not because you are a full endorser of either Stein or the Greens.
I think we have shown a really good example on an ongoing basis with our support, worker strike back support for the Jill Stein campaign. We have shown on an ongoing basis what it looks like to have a, a principled example of principled unity on the left for in the interest of the working class, while also having a friendly debate and discussion on disagreements. In fact, even at our rallies, it's clear that we have some disagreements. In fact, on the very point that you started this interview with, which is our meaning worker strikebacks, and my very clear position that that the critical objective for working people in using the Jill Stein campaign this year to build the anti-war movement and working people's movement is to fight to defeat Kamala Harris in a key swing state like Michigan, whereas you'll hear the Green Party and the Jill Stein campaign not really embracing that position and mostly talking about how working people, American people, need more options. And I don't exactly agree with that, because it's not that working people are looking for options like, different brands of toothpaste. What working people are hungering for is a party that represents them versus the warmongering billionaire class's interests. And so for us, that is the driving force. And we also, the other difference that has emerged, and again we have had a friendly debate about it, is how do we build this campaign in the interest of the working class, in the interest of the anti-war movement and the Muslim community, which is especially the Palestinian and Arab communities, which are directly hurting, having their own family members lost, which is a devastating loss for them. Which is that we in Worker Strike Back, we believe that the best way to build this movement and using this campaign is to be truthful and sober about facts with working people. When we organize, we take the question of organizing working people very seriously in Worker Strike Back. And we believe that it doesn't help us to build the morale of working people, of the anti-war movement, of the Muslim community that wants to fight to end this genocide and is angry at the Democrats and Republicans, to tell them that maybe Jill Stein can win. We don't agree that that is useful, because if you look at what's going to happen, what's likely going to happen after election night, and maybe the results won't be settled on election night, but the point is that on Inauguration Day in January, it is going to be either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump in the White House. I think we have to be crystal clear about that and explain the need to fight for every possible vote for Jill Stein from the context of how it can play a key role in building an anti-war movement that is independent of the Democrats and Republicans, that emboldens working people, builds up the morale of the Muslim community by sending a powerful message to Harris and the Democratic Party. And I strongly believe, and my fellow activists in Worker Strike Back strongly believe, that working people are fully capable of understanding this and being energized to fight back. They understand that Jill Stein is not going to win. So the Jill Stein campaign saying that 10 times that they're going to win is not going to convince people that they're going to win. Instead, unfortunately, it could be counterproductive potentially, because when the results show that Jill Stein campaign is nowhere near winning. I mean, we've seen the trajectories. It's going to be, as we said, if her campaign gets 1%, that should be celebrated. But how that same 1% or 1.2% or whatever it is gets perceived by working people very much depends on how the strategy has been laid out. If we were to go around saying Jill Stein could win or Jill Stein could get 20%, whatever, and then she gets 1% or 1.2%, then instead of seeing that million or million and a half votes as a tremendous confirmation that working people are rejecting, a whole section of working people are rejecting the Democrats and Republicans and are ready to fight, instead of seeing it as a message of being a building block, instead it will be seen as demoralizing. It could be, I'm not saying it will, but it could be seen as demoralizing that, oh, well, we were told we could win. We were told we could win 5, 10%, 20%. And instead it's such a small result. Nothing works. Third parties don't work. I'm just going to get a check out of politics. So those risks are very, are quite significant. And that is why we believe that it is important to be truthful and honest to the working class and make the case in a way that will actually energize working people. And we've had a lot of people tell us that they appreciate that we're being honest about it. And furthermore, we should also examine the further point that if instead of getting 1.5%, Jill Stein were to get 5%, that would be massive. I mean, I don't expect that it will be, but I would be happy to be proven wrong. I want the Jill Stein campaign. I want the anti-war vote to be as strong as possible. But my point is that if you warn people with a sober understanding of what's likely to happen, and then your results are better than that, then nobody's going to blame you for misleading them. I mean, it's just going to add to more of the energizing effect. And we're not speaking about this hypothetically. We use this approach in our election campaigns in Seattle. In 2012, I ran against the most powerful Democrat in the state house, Frank Chop. He was the Speaker of the House at that time. We did not expect to come anywhere close to winning. In the primary, we were running against another Democrat actually, and we told people in our activism during the campaign and during the primary campaign that we are probably going to win about 1%, but it was still worth fighting for because this was the first example in 100 years of a socialist working class campaign. And we got tremendous support from working people. I mean, it was such a fiery, energetic campaign. We won 9% in the primary. It was a huge shot in the arm for people to think that, wow, we went from expecting 1% to 9%. Nobody walked home after primary election night feeling demoralized. People walked home thinking, I'm going to get up tomorrow and fight like hell in the general election. Even there, we said, we're not going to win, but let's fight like hell to win every vote. And then we got almost 30% of the vote, which was the highest vote at that time that any of Frank Chop's opponents had ever gotten. And we used that as the building block to then win the city council election, which we won the very next year. But even there, we did not run the campaign saying we're going to win. Instead, we said, look how uphill it is. Look how the Democrats fight viciously against us. We need every single one of you out here. So we used that as a rallying cry and may help people understand that this is not about admiring me and voting for me and leaving it at that. It's about you getting involved because we will need that movement on the streets and in our workplaces.
Before I talk about socialist alternative, as you know, I worked with Ralph Nader in his campaign, and Ralph made precisely that argument. It wasn't to win, but Ralph, who understands corporate power probably better than anyone else in this country, had watched the incremental corporate coup that had pushed out traditional liberal Democrats like Fulbright and others that he once worked with, and realized that essentially the Zionist lobby, the corporatists, owned the Congress, and that if he could pull, these are his words, 5, 10, 15 million people away from the Democratic Party, that was the way to put pressure on the Democratic Party. I want to talk about socialist alternative, but I just also want to mention that the Democrats are running scared in Michigan and have prepared a series of apparently negative ads about Jill Stein that they are about to dump on the public.
I believe that. In fact, already we are seeing their signs of nervousness, but with their almost historic, because I don't think it's happened before, where the Harris campaign, like the Democratic Party candidates campaign themselves released an attack ad against Jill Stein. and it backfired on them. Most people have greeted that attack ad as a confirmation that, oh, maybe you're getting really scary internal polls about how you're doing against Trump. And so it has widely been perceived by working people as a sign of weakness, as it should, because that's what it is. I mean, if they're attacking her in that way, that it shows it betrays their anxiety about what's about their own election outcomes, and we've seen that kind of attack backfire repeatedly. I mean, Jill Stein went on the Breakfast Club podcast, which is these black commentators, including this odious woman Angela Rye, who uses her black and female identity as a battering ram against the left, against working people, in service of the Democratic Party. It's a perfect example of how insidious these individuals are and the role that they play. But it backfired. I mean, that YouTube has, I don't know. I mean, last time I checked, thousands upon thousands of comments by many black people, but not just black people, working people in general, saying, I didn't even know about Jill Stein's campaign, but now I'm going to vote for her. Because the whole setup where they were viciously attacking Jill Stein completely backfired. But I think overall, as you said, the fact that the Harris campaign is responding is confirmation that this type of combative strategy from working people and the left, as we have put forward, which is defeat Harris and Michigan, fight to defeat Harris and Michigan, fight to extract every possible vote for Jill Stein in Michigan, that type of offensive strategy is the way to go. And the best confirmation, as we've always seen throughout our work in Seattle, where we won the $15 minimum wage, the Amazon tax, and unprecedented renters' rights, despite the opposition of every Democrat in the city, and not to mention big business, we've seen that the best confirmation, the best compliments come from the ruling class themselves because of the way they respond. When they feel threatened, they start responding, they start attacking. Otherwise, if they're not attacking you, then you should know that you're irrelevant and you're doing something wrong. And so this is confirmation that this type of offensive strategy actually works. And it's also what working people want to get involved in. It is when we put forward this point that let's actually get organized to fight against the Democratic Party. That is what people want to hear, working people want to hear. And I should also mention that the way Workers Strike Back has been campaigning and our overall strategy is by no means, as I was alluding to earlier, limited to just this election. As you said, it's not about just surfacing every 4 years for an election. It is about using election campaigns themselves, win or lose, as a platform to build future struggle. And I do disagree with the Jill Stein campaign. They have put forward this idea that somehow Workers Strike Back and I are using this strategy because we don't want to talk about winning, or we're less excited about winning. I mean, that's nonsense. Obviously, I mean, if our record in Seattle is there for anyone to see, we won 4 elections despite the millions of dollars and the absolutely grotesque opposition by the Democratic Party, all their attacks, personalized and political, all kinds of attacks. Despite all of that, we won 4 elections. We won historic victories like the $15 wage. And we left office last year undefeated and launched Workers Strike Back, this nationwide organization. So unfortunately for the working class, the example that we have provided in Seattle over our decade is at this moment the only example, the only contemporary example of the kind of the fight back strategy, the fighting strategy to use elections as a vehicle to build social movements. And we're doing no different here. I mean, we are talking about fighting for every possible vote for Jill Stein, but again, our strategy is to build the anti-war movement, build the working class movement, and we need what we are campaigning for, which is an organizing conference in February. On the February 22nd, 23rd weekend, we are going to have on one day a national organizing conference, and on another day the Workers Strike Back National Convention. And we're inviting working people and organizations from across the country to join us at that. We want you there, Chris Hedges, absolutely, because we can't stop with this election. I mean, at the end of the day, it is going to be a warmonger in chief in the White House. And so we will need to continue organizing. And in order to organize that, we are going to need a fighting strategy, this similar kind of offensive strategy in the anti-war movement. And we're going to need working people in the labor movement, union members, rank and file union members in the labor movement to begin building a militant layer inside the labor movement, because that is going to be crucial. I mean, the role of the labor movement and flowing from that, the role of the rank and file against the labor leadership that is tied to the Democrats is going to be part of the backbone of fighting against this war and fighting for the needs of working people.
Well, it's just an understanding of how power politics work. That's what made Saul Alinsky effective as a community organizer in Chicago. Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. These naive appeals to the goodness of centers of power don't work. That's just a fact.